speak to the Honorable Isaac Adongo. He is Member of Parliament for Bolga Central and also a member of the Finance Committee of Parliament. You can also call him the chief critic of the Akufo-Addo government's handling of the economy. Honorable Adongo, you're welcome to Eyewitness News.
Thank you. Good evening, and good evening to your listeners.
So tonight, I'm just giving you a platform to say thank you, Ken Ofori-Atta. Thank you, Nana Akufo-Addo. You have done a great job. Congratulations.
Well, it's unfortunate. I wish I could say that because we all want this economy to improve. But what has happened is nothing to celebrate. Don't forget that this is a default rating of your local currency loans. It is not about the health of the economy. It's not about economic growth. It's not about the developments within the economy. It is about the fact that until the EDEP took place, the debt exchange program took place, your debts were at a level where your local currency bonds, the CD denominated loans that you had, where you were defaulting on them, and there was a risk of further default. Now you have engaged your creditors and say, look, I cannot pay you. I want you to agree to a different term. And those different terms provide different profile and different maturities and different payment obligations at this point in time. So you have some room now to breathe. And because you have some room now to breathe, we can lift the rating on your potential default and actual default of your local currency loans. That cannot be something that you celebrate. It's not as if the rating has been lifted because you managed to pay your debt. The default that was coming, you averted it by paying, but it is that you actually admitted that you cannot pay. In some instances, you actually defaulted, and then you finally have to negotiate with your creditors, for them to give you some concessions and for them to accept to change the terms of the original agreement. It is on the basis of that they are saying, we cannot now say that your default will happen again in the nearest future. But even still, there are still elements of risk within your debt portfolio, even on the local market. That is why we still cannot give you a clean bill of health, and we still are placing you on CCC. CCC still reflects junk status with some limited remedies in respect of some aspects of your local debt. So it is not about the economy recovering. It's not about the economy improving. It's not about you being efficient in managing the economy. It's essentially about the fact that your creditors have given you a lifeline.
But Fitch itself acknowledges that this is because of the government's handling of the DDE. So surely there's some credit that ought to be given, for which reason this rating agency decides to promote us. And so even if it is not the general outlook of the economy, at least one aspect of it has been dealt with well.
How can it be dealt with when we are taking people's money, when you are not fulfilling your obligations? And as a country and as a sovereign, your pride is in your ability to pay your debt. And so when you then get to a point where people have to lose their money, and people have to lose their interest, and people have to postpone the time they will get their money, and will have to sacrifice to subsidize your economy, that is nothing to celebrate about. And so I do not understand how you would say that that is a positive thing to be celebrated, when all that you have done is basically to appropriate private property for public good.
All right, but I'm saying that these ratings agencies have served as a basis for lambasting the government, and clearly they know best, and I'm using that cautiously. That is why when they make a pronouncement, it's a pronouncement that is held as sacrosanct. Now, if they make this pronouncement that they have made now, it will amount to hypocrisy, don't you agree, not to say that what they have done now means there's positive, because from all indications, what they have said and done means we are doing something positive. You do not even want to accept. You are simply saying that this looks like a cosmetic thing that the government has done, and so it's not worthy of praise. But I'm saying that Fitch should not celebrate something cosmetic, should it?
So what are we saying here? What we are saying is that fundamentally you are not doing anything that is worthy of celebration. What you are simply doing is that you are denying poor people their money. You are denying pensioners all their money. You are denying people who need money now to pay the school fees of their children to hold on for the next 4 or 5 years. On the basis of that, you create room in your fiscal space and some liquidity to fund your budget. Of course, Fitch would interpret that to mean an achievement because then the problem of default would have been postponed. But to the ordinary Ghanaian who is suffering the brunt of this, who is losing the money, who is not getting the interest payment at full value, and who can no longer trust government when government comes saying, give me your money and I'll pay you the interest and I'll pay you the principal, that person will not see this as positive. And for us, as local interpreters of this economy, we don't see this to be anything to celebrate. Of course, remember that once we've gotten to the rock bottom, we can only go up. We can't take further. So there's a sense in which the ratings would improve. But the ratings will not improve because we have done something fundamental. It is simply because we are at a rock bottom and we can't go further down. We can only look up.
Well, before we go, your good friend Kenneth Oyata is in China. Any news on how he's doing trying to get the Chinese on board? You were of the view that nothing was going to come out. The Chinese were not going to play ball. He's gone there now. It appears that he may come back with some good news. What are you picking up?
Well, my flight entering China anytime in point. I can go to China today if I want. It's about what you went there to do and what you come home with. You don't appear in China in 5 days, 1 week, and return with a dense cancellation. So the fact that he's in China, you may never know. He's probably just a tourist there. But will he come back with anything that would solve our problem within this short period? I believe that these meetings are going to be more exploratory. They are going to be meetings to gauge each other's mood and to be able to plan the strategy going forward in dealing with each party. And so we should not be expecting too much from this trip to China at this point in time. Probably he will take a day or two off to rest and come back.
Well, that's not what the ministry, through the deputy, has communicated to us. So I don't know. But let me bring you another story that I've just noticed. There's a story making the rounds that Ghana has missed the board meeting for March at the IMF. Do you know anything about that, and what does that mean?
Well, you remember that I had told you in one of the interviews that you granted me.
That was last week, Thursday, yes.
Yeah, just last week. I made it clear that a lot of the prior actions have not been met. And because the prior actions are not met, what will the staff recommend to the board? There's nothing to recommend to the board because all the issues they raise as the prior actions to go to the board are outstanding. Beyond the fiscal measures that you can say are controlled by Ghana, the majority of the external debt restructuring are outside of our hands, and we haven't made any progress in that front. And so if they were to table us an agenda for the next meeting, what would they be discussing? And I told you that the worst case that could happen was for Ghana to be considered for an approval in principle, which would then mean that we just are giving you some PR gimmick to carry along and give some assurances to the economy. But then the difficult task of meeting the prior actions have to be concluded before you can actualize that agreement. As it is now, it is quite clear that we cannot meet the timelines, and it was quite obvious that the talk about March was far-fetched. And I don't see anything that is a surprise. We had always expected this. We knew for a fact that the government was just managing expectations. And I told you that the reason the city is stable now is essentially because we have suspended the payment of our offshore debt obligations. And because we have done that, the exchange rate, the forex that we would have used to do that is what we are sprinkling around the economy. And if we do not secure a deal in good time, when we finish sprinkling that and we don't get any forex deal, the economy will be in for a very, very difficult time. We need to encourage the ministry to engage much faster and involve better experienced hands within our local economy to assist them achieve something as quickly as possible.
While you are doing that and hoping the government does that, you are withholding something very important. The president has nominated someone to be a minister of state at the finance ministry for some reason, and someone to handle our trade ministry, and also someone to handle our Greek ministry. These are very key sectors. It appears Parliament is slowing on whether or not it will approve these gentlemen. Is it that you have not bothered yourself to consider the report of the appointments committee, or the committee has not brought its report for deliberation? What's happening with these three people who have been brought to lead these critical areas? Minister of State at the Finance Ministry, Minister of Agriculture.
How many ministers does Akufo-Addo have? Do you remember? Even in the absence of these, do you remember the number of ministers he currently has?
I will not answer that. Please continue.
Yeah, he has such a huge number of ministers. And as a matter of fact, for each of the portfolios that we have mentioned, there's a caretaker minister for those portfolios. It's not as if there are no ministers oversighting those ministries. And the fact that we are very apprehensive that this presented a very good opportunity for government to start the signaling of expenditure cuts, because he can simply move ministers around, collapse some ministries, and reassign the current ministers to handle these portfolios if they are still necessary in terms of his restructuring of the ministry. The fact that he thinks that these 5 ministers out of a host of close to 100 ministers is a problem should tell you that our problems are not going to get away, because he doesn't need these 5. All he needs to do is to reassign ministers within the current portfolios and collapse some of the ministries in order that he gives Ghana a chance to cut down on our expenditure. So he's not ready to do that. He still wants to live the life he's been living that brought us to this point.
So they will not be approved?
Well, that is not a decision of the minority. That is a decision of the House. So we shouldn't be creating the impression that the minority as a caucus has the ultimate power to determine the fate of these ministers. It is a collective decision of the House. And when the question is put, a decision will be made. As we speak now, the question has not been put, and no one can be blamed for the question not being put.
Thank you for speaking to us. As Honorable Isaac Adongo is MP for Bolga Central.